vacation.
See?
I'm learning.
Good to go. Okay, everybody ready? Let's get someone's attention here. Everybody ready? Take your seats.
Good morning. My name is Claudia Coker. I've lived in Astoria houses for more than 60 years, and I've served as president of the Resident Association since 2008. It's my job to be a voice to 3,000 people who call Astoria houses home. As long as I've lived in Astoria houses, our community has been cut off from so much of the city. As a resident of this community, I can assure you that we are a mile away from the nearest subway, much too far of a walk for many of our older residents. And even for those able to make the trip, getting anywhere other than Midtown Manhattan requires long commutes and multiple transfers. I also worked for transit, the New York City Transit Authority, for 25 years, and I am a retiree, so I'm a regular witness. The New York City Ferry is going to change all of that. The Astoria Landing will be just a short walk from our front doors at $2.75. It's a ride that my neighbors and I can afford. New York City Ferry means we will be able to access jobs in neighborhoods we previously could not reach. New York City Ferry means that working parents will have more time with their families instead of spending hours on long commutes. For people in Astoria houses, this is the biggest public investment in transportation we've seen in decades. It has opened opportunities that were closed to us far too long. So I want to thank Mayor de Blasio for delivering this incredible service and delivering on his promise to Astoria houses. And with that, I'd like to introduce to some and present to others none other than the Honorable Mayor de Blasio.
Claudia, thank you so much for giving voice to what the 3,000 people you represent experience every day. So I want to thank you for all the public service you've done when you worked at transit and your service as the leader of the Residents Association. And I got to thank you because I know Astoria Houses became a better place the day you became the head of the Residents Association. I know what you've done has made a huge, huge difference. And Claudia just laid out a history of inequity and unanswered needs that we know too well in this city. We got together with a lot of you in Red Hook when we started that line. We talked about another community, rich in public housing, but very sadly cut off from so much of what people need in the city. When we started the Rockaways line, we surely talked about a place that had been cut off unfairly and needed more access, including for folks who lived in public housing and folks who needed economic opportunity. So there's a pattern here that's quite clear. NYC Ferry opens doors for people, and it's being located in many of the locations that have been problems in this city for decades, areas that just didn't have enough transportation, that were deprived of the mass transit they needed. So we're righting a lot of wrongs here in this process. And NYC Ferry is a success if you talk about righting those wrongs and creating more equality, creating more opportunity. It's certainly also a success if you talk about ridership. And as you all know by now, ridership has immediately and far exceeded what we projected. And that is a very, very good thing. I want to thank everyone who's here with us. You're going to hear from a number of the people around me. I want to give a special thank you to the folks who have worked so hard, everyone here who's been a part of making NYC Ferry work. Remember, this is a brand new enterprise, started from scratch and begun just months ago. Big thanks to James Patchett, the president of EDC, and everyone at EDC. Thank you for your great work. And a big thanks to Cameron Clark, who's with us, Vice President of Hornblower, for the great work everyone at Hornblower has done to create these ferries. So I think we understand that if people can't get around, everything that's great about New York City becomes a lot less great for them. If you can't get to a job interview or a job, if you can't get to educational opportunities, if you can't get to health care, if you're cut off or if it takes way too long to get places, your quality of life is diminished and you just don't have as much opportunity to get ahead economically. We don't want to see that happen. The whole goal of this administration has been to increase fairness and equality and opportunity. Now, here's what dawned on us as we thought about all the things we had to do around this city, and you're getting a great example right here. Here's one of our greatest assets, one of the great coastal cities of the world. Here's the East River. We got the Hudson River on the other side. We got the harbor. But look, you see very few vessels on it right now. Back in our history, you would have seen hundreds and hundreds of vessels plying these waters. We, as a city, as a society, we turned away from the water for a variety of reasons, and it was a mistake. The false idol was the automobile. And obviously, during the time of Robert Moses in particular, everything was focused on making life easier for the automobile. And highways were built everywhere, but mass transit was not built where it was needed. And we didn't take advantage of the waterways, which gave us a chance to move people around without congestion. There's no traffic jams, there's no stoplights or stop signs, there's no cars that break down and jam up the road. You can see, there's all that open space right there. We wanted to change the dynamics. The idea of NYC Ferry was to be a game changer. We're just a few months into it. But this is the beginning of something potentially very, very big for this city. Because, you know the classic phrase, if you build it, they will come. Well, people are coming. People are choosing the ferry. And the more people who choose the ferry, the more people who get off the roads and reduce congestion. The more people who choose the ferry, the more people get out of the subways, which in so many cases have become congestion. We obviously believe deeply in mass transit, but we know there are some lines, including lines that serve communities near here, that are constantly crowded. We're giving another option, another way that'll help people have a choice that can work for them. So this morning, there was some very important news. This morning, NYC Ferry transported its 1 millionth rider. Big day for NYC Ferry. Now, that's been less than 3 months of a brand new service that a lot of people don't even know is there yet, have not had a chance to experience. In less than 3 months, 1 million riders already. It's before all of the routes have been begun, and it is a month ahead of the projected time when we would hit that number. This obviously suggests a much faster growth rate than anyone expected. So we celebrate that because we see more and more people deciding the best way to get to work is on the ferry. We see more and more people deciding the best way to get to the things that they want to do on the weekends and have fun with their family and friends is to take the ferry. This is going to be a great thing for this city. More and more people make that choice. Now, we know there's been some challenges. The blessing is a lot of people like it. The challenge is a lot of people have shown up more than expected. So to make sure we do not have long lines and that we address the demand, we've been chartering boats to add capacity and keep the system flexible. That is largely addressing the problem. We've also particularly had a huge interest in the Rockaways line on summer weekends. Not surprising, you predicted it. And we've gotten larger ferries and charter boats to address that situation. We also have decided, as a result of already seeing just these first few months of success, to increase the size of the boats that are now coming into production that will be part of our fleet. So each of these boats will be increased by 67% in terms of their capacity. Much bigger boats is going to help us address demand, and we're going to keep building the system. More routes are being added as we speak. And I announced today the specific news that we are opening the Astoria line on August 29th. So good news for Astoria, good news for Long Island City, good news for Roosevelt Island. Now, you heard from Claudia. For folks in Astoria houses, right now they have a 15 or 20-minute walk to the subway. This ferry service is going to be right next door to Astoria houses. That's going to be fantastic for people who live there. And it means for them now, instead of 20 minutes to walk to the subway, 20 minutes on the ferry and they're in Midtown Manhattan. That's the difference it's going to be. As I said, in addition to Astoria, Long Island City will be a winner. Long Island City, everyone can see amazing things are happening here. A growing neighborhood, a lot of demand. People are using the ferry here at this stop already. Another stop will be created farther north in Long Island City to give even more options to people who live here. And obviously, every time you add another stop and you add more service, it takes pressure off other stops and other routes, and it allows us to keep running things smoother. So that expansion, we think, is going to help to make everything run more smoothly and on time. Finally, Roosevelt Island will get a ferry stop, and this is a very big deal because it coincides with the opening of the Cornell Technion campus. Now, this is a very important thing that unto itself. The Cornell Technion campus, which I give the Bloomberg administration tremendous credit for initiating, is going to be a key element in our strategy to keep building our technology sector in the city. It's already 350,000 jobs. We want to see it get up to 400 or even 500,000 jobs. Having Cornell Technion there is going to be a centerpiece, but let's face it, it's not the easiest place to get to. The ferry service is going to make it even easier for folks in the tech community to be a part of Cornell Technion and vice versa for folks coming out of that campus to connect to the larger city. So this is all about creating more access around the city, giving people opportunity regardless of zip code, creating a transportation system that actually can work for the 21st century. And before I conclude, I just want to note all of the new elements that we need in mass transit in the city. We need more ferries. We need more select bus service, and that's been a big priority administration. We're investing in that, working with the MTA on that, and that's been a great success. We need light rail, and that initial effort we're making from Astoria down to Sunset Park, we believe that's going to be a game changer and then a model for doing more light rail in places that need it. And we need further access to City Bike. All of those things are, again, different pieces of the equation, but all new over the course of the last decade, giving New Yorkers lots and lots more options, and we are going to have to keep building on all those fronts to keep up with the needs of this city. So we look forward to doing that, and we know we have the capacity to get the job done. A few words in Spanish. Nuestro nuevo servicio de ferries está conectando a más neoyorquinos en cada condado con el resto de la ciudad. Más de 1 millón de personas lo han usado desde que empezamos hace 3 meses. Estamos añadiendo más ferries y rutas para atender el crecimiento de la demanda. Y este 29 de agosto empieza el servicio en Astoria. With that, it's a good news in English and Spanish both. A new line opening in Astoria, more service for Queens. I know someone who likes it when there's more for the people of Queens. The Borough President, Melinda Katz.
Good morning. We want to thank the mayor for being here for this great announcement. And I love what he was saying. Amazing things are happening in Queens. And they truly, truly are. It's an exciting time for us, right? Great neighborhood, shopping, professional sports, new businesses, our nightlife, our arts, beyond compare to any other borough. I love the fact that we are growing. We're growing every single day, not only in population, but also in tourism. And this ferry is going to not only respond to that growth, but create further growth, while understanding that folks still have to get to jobs and school and all of the things that create our neighborhoods. And as you know, in Queens, we value our neighborhoods. And make no mistake about it, ladies and gentlemen, I have been doing this job on and off in government for 24 years.
Long years.
I did not have gray hair when I started in this business. And it's been 24 years, at least as far as I've been in, that we have had different administrations talking about how to connect to the boroughs better. That we've had different types of government, state, city, federal, talking about, well, you know, if we only use the waterway and we only did this or that in every borough, we would be able to get our people in and out better and easier, and we'd be able to sustain the growth that this great city has. It isn't until now that someone took that on. And, you know, the mayor says I'm always fighting for more things for Queens, and we always have this sort of running joke. And we spent the week together last week, and we're happy to be with him again here today. But the truth is that after 24 years, Mayor de Blasio has actually created the 5-borough system of Ferry. And I really want to congratulate you and your staff for all the work that you have done to make that happen. I also want to congratulate our majority leader, Jimmy Van Bramer, for the great work that he does in making sure that Western Queens has never forgotten Ms. Koger for fighting for Astoria houses every single day, and for our community boards who never give up the fight. We have Community Board 1 and 2 represented here today, but we also have Community Board 14, who is very affected by this in the Rockaways. And Mr. Mayor, we love the fact that we're getting bigger boats. Yeah. Love the fact that we're getting a better system. We look forward to more trips in the future, going back and forth from all of the areas. No, I give them a hard time, but I have to say, this is a great day for the entire city of New York, especially for the borough of Queens. But, you know, Queens is a part of this 5-borough plan. And it means that as the city grows, we are able to transport our folks better, more efficiently. And I thank him for the efforts. Congratulations on today.
Thank you very much. So, Western Queens is energetically represented at City Hall. Jimmy Van Bramer does not have a shyness problem. And it seems like whenever we do something good for his district, there's an immediate additional demand, which is quite impressive. So, but the truth is, in addition to him being majority leader and energetically representing his district, this is a part of the city that's growing so rapidly and needs more options for people. And that's why it's so important that we're going to have a new stop for Long Island City coming in real soon at the end of August. My pleasure to introduce to you the majority leader of the council, Jimmy Van Bramer.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, and good morning, and welcome to a little slice of heaven that we call Western Queens and Long Island City, in particular, Hunters Point. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for being here and for the monumental announcement today. I want to thank the borough president for her amazing partnership. Just yesterday, we broke ground on a new $2 million park in Woodside with your parks commissioner. There are good things happening all over the place. Very, very excited. Ms. Koger, thank you so much for your leadership and for all of the Community Board 1 and 2 stars that are behind me, for all of their support and partnership, and the community and civic leaders who are here. This park would not be as great as it is without the Hunters Point Parks Conservancy. Barbara Etzel and Brent O'Leary are here among them, and of course we call him Turtle. Some know him as Frank Raphael. He is the owner of LIC Landing, this amazing establishment here, where many of you have received coffee and Danish, among the best things you'll ever have. Come back later for some adult beverages, right, Turtle? Yeah. So this is a great place. I'm really proud to represent it, and this is a great announcement because some people, although you wouldn't know it today because it's so beautiful, have talked about the summer of hell. But for those of us who need the 7 train, it's been more like the decade of hell, right? So many problems for all of Long Island City, Sunnyside, and Woodside. And the truth is we need more options, more transportation options, and we've gotten that, right? This neighborhood, this district has City Bike. this neighborhood, this district, has ferry service. We're expanding City Bike further north later this year. And with this additional ferry stop here, we're going to be able to accommodate the growing demand for service here. It is a worthwhile investment in the people of Long Island City and Western Queens. And I want to point out some of the other things that are happening here, if you'll allow me. Right? We are looking right behind me at the new $100 million extension of Hunters Point South Park. You can see the new trees and the new grass and everything that's being planted. That's scheduled to open next year. Just to the north, scheduled to open, we hope soon, the new $40 million state-of-the-art public library that is also happening here, and they're painting it today. I went by earlier today. We have a new ferry stop. We have 3 new schools that are funded in the budget, over $200 million, Mr. Mayor, to build 3 new schools here in this neighborhood. And as you can see, we have a lot of children, a lot of babies. This is a very popular spot in the world. There are a lot of babies hanging out in this park. So it's great. It's great. We need this so desperately. This additional stoppage you can see under construction, nearing completion, is going to really help get folks to and from work and to and from the places that they need to be, to make sure that this continues to be one of the most desirable neighborhoods in all of the city of New York. I'm really, really proud to represent this great place and proud of all of the big announcements that we have made and will yet have. And yes, we will ask for more, because that is my job, to make sure that all of these great people that you see who are making Western Queens such an amazing place get all of the things that they deserve. And I'm proud of the work that we've done together to make sure that this is really a gem of a neighborhood for all people to enjoy and live in and raise a family. So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Finally, I had the joy of doing a town hall meeting last week in Astoria, my old stomping ground, and we talked about a lot of the issues that people care about in the community. We definitely heard from Astoria houses about a number of concerns, and as Claudia said earlier, the need for more access to the things that matter. So I know this is an important day for the councilman who represents Astoria. My pleasure to bring forward Councilman Costa Constantinidis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and this is an exciting day. This is a very exciting day. I mean, we are here in Western Queens so looking forward to seeing the Astoria line come coming to fruition and getting it done. I mean, this has been, we have our civic leaders here, Claudia Koger and Richard Kuzami and Vanessa and Liz, and of course my colleagues, Jimmy Van Bramer and Florence. We all were looking for another transportation option in Western Queens. They, from the Astoria houses, they can see Gracie Mansion from their houses.
And vice versa.
It's 1,515 feet from the end of the Howard's Cove Peninsula to Manhattan, and almost walking distance. And yet the residents of the Howard's Cove Peninsula have probably one of the longest commutes in all of District 22, because they have to catch a bus to a train, so it's close to an hour. So now having this accessible service, sustainable service, so instead of having to get in anyone's cars or any other way, they can just get right on the water and enjoy a beautiful, beautiful ride every morning. It's going to be an exciting day in Western Queens the first day that ferry launches, because everyone will be able to cut their transit rides in half, and that's an exciting thing. And moreover, the entire community there for years has looked around, surrounded by water and no connection to it. And so now this is an opportunity for transportation and to educate our young people about the waterways around them, and to have interaction with that waterways yet again. So very excited about citywide ferry service and the announcement today around the million rides. And that's as we look to strive for 80 by 50, getting people out of their cars and into transit's an important thing. So excited about that. But having not only this ferry stop, beautiful stop here in Long Island City, but having the amazing stop that we're going to have at the Astoria houses is really going to make a difference in people's lives for transportation and to get around. And that extra time with their kids. I know I just was late because I was dropping off my son. But that extra time that they're going to have, that they're not going to have to spend on a train or a bus, or not have to spend in their car, that they'll be able to spend with their children before they can go to sleep, is going to make all the difference. You know, I've missed many nights where I get home right after my son falls asleep, and being able to, for those families not to miss their kids, to have that time is going to be a game changer. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to EDC. Congratulations. Looking forward to many more big things.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to take questions on today's announcement on the ferries. Then I've got another update I want to give you after that, and then we'll go into questions on all topics. So first, anything on the ferries, Juliet?
Mayor, did you identify the millionth rider, or did they get like balloons and party and...
I fear we didn't do that, and we should have, so heads will roll, DDC. I don't know if we... Did we identify the millionth rider? James Patchett.
We have not yet identified the specific millionth rider, but we are. The hornblower has kindly offered to offer half-price drafts on board all day. So, on all seriousness,
Just the millionth rider?
for all riders on the millionth day of
everybody?
service. Yes.
Okay, this should have been the top of my announcement. Could you repeat that, please?
Half-price drafts all day on
all
NYC
NYC
Ferry.
Ferry.
All NYC Ferry.
James, I'm going to teach you something about public relations. Okay. So, we do not know the millionth rider. We're going to make, at the 2 millionth rider, we're going to be smart enough to find the person. But I'm very happy that Hornblower is celebrating in such a generous fashion. Do you want to add? Or no? Okay.
80%.
Of the million riders, do you have any estimate as to the number of the percentage of people who are residents of New York City and how many are tourists?
James is going to speak to that because obviously we're early on in the process, but we have been looking at that. The number one reason we created this, of course, is for people getting to work, getting to school, getting to medical appointments, and that means for everyday New Yorkers. But James will speak to what we know so far from initial survey.
Right. So we ran an initial survey over the last couple of weeks. So we don't know every rider, but we do know is that over 80% of riders were identified as being New Yorkers, and that survey was conducted both during the day and on the weekend, and the total was slightly over 80% were New Yorkers.
Other questions on the ferry, on the new service, on the millionth rider? Any questions on the ferry? Question, yes.
Have there been any updates on whether or not this particular network might be expanded to Staten Island?
So it's the same reality we talked about before. Now, I will say the speed with which we're surpassing the goals is an important factor in this discussion, because what I've said is before we take next steps, there's obvious interest in Staten Island and other parts of the city of adding additional lines, but I wanted to see how ridership went. So this is a promising sign so far, but my message has been let's get through the build-out of this set of lines into the beginning of 2018, and that's the natural time to then decide if we're ready to go the next distance and add additional lines. So it is not a formal update, but the news is encouraging based on what we've seen so far.
I know the borough president has proposed a privately funded ferry service between St. George and Midtown. Are you going to be assuming any of that happens? Are you going to be looking at that in terms of whether it makes sense for the city to jump in? Or do you think your timeline is maybe ahead of that? Or
well, no, I think it's different. I think it's a very fair question, but I'd say I think they're running on very different tracks, if you will. The private service discussion is obviously about the development that's occurring on the North Shore. And so there's different realities there about the private sector's role that could be obvious. They're going to benefit. You know, there's been ferry service connected to other private sector dynamics like IKEA and Red Hook and things like that. So that, I would say, needs to be looked at unto itself. There's been some discussion of whether to connect it to New Jersey. That's obviously a whole different discussion. We're going to look at further expansion based on what we have been seeing so far and what we're trying to do, first and foremost, again, for New York City commuters, and then also for weekend use. And there's a number of nominations that have been made from around the city for different lines. So we're going to look at all that from scratch. The effort the borough president is undertaking is a good one, but I think it's a different kind of approach because it connects to the private sector development. We're going to keep working on that on its own track. Would you like to add to that? Okay. Yes, Juliet.
Are there still the waits or the lines for the Rockaway ferries, and is there a way to ameliorate that?
Yeah, we have a lot of improvement on that front. This one was one of the things we underestimated, that the demand would be quite so high. So I think I'll start, and James can give you some specific facts, but I'd say we have two realities. The weekday reality for the different routes running during the weekday, we feel very good about. We've added some backup boats. So in some places where we saw particular crowding at like a particular moment of the rush hour, we have the ability to come in with a backup boat and pick up more folks. But the real challenge has been the Rockaways and then also Governor's Island, and at key times in the morning, key times in the afternoon when people are coming back. So there's been a lot of additional capacity rented, leased to be able to do that. We've substantially reduced the waits. There's still going to be times when people go into the beach or coming from the beach are going to have some waits, but it's much less. And we'll keep making adjustments as we go along. You want to speak to the numbers or the new service you added?
Sure. So we started. The original plan was to run 2 vessels on the Rockaways, 250-person vessels. Since that time, we've added 2 additional regular service on the weekends. So that's 4 total vessels that are running. So we've doubled capacity. In the last 2 weekends, we ran we were experimenting with running a 500-person vessel. The last 2 weekends, on top of the 450-person vessels, when we were doing that, we were people were not waiting very long at all. We were able to clear all of the lines. So we've had good success the last couple of weekends. We're looking to extend that and other options as well to ensure that we're meeting the demand on the weekends.
Stops on the NYC Ferry. They also have high demand, especially during rush hour peak time.
Yeah, and that's where we did need to add additional boats to relieve some of that demand because it was particular moments in the rush hour that we found were challenging. So why don't you speak to that?
Hi. So the original vessel route planned 3 vessels along the East River. We had added a 4th vessel just initially to deal with demand issues. And then we were running a 5th vessel, which what we called a sweeper vessel, which was being used to, essentially, when we identified people who'd been left behind in the dock, we ran the vessel out there. But over time, what we discovered, to no one's surprise, was that everyone wanted to get to work around 9 a.m., which meant that everyone was showing up at the docks right around, between 8:15 and 8:30. So instead of continuing to just run a vessel that was waiting to show up when people were going to be left behind, we've instead now temporarily added an additional vessel to show up at those docks about 5 minutes after the initial vessel on those key rush hour routes. In the last few mornings, we've been running that very successfully, and that vessel has been successfully able to pick up everyone who came for those first boats. So overall, actually, it's been a very successful new solution to this, and we're going to continue to have to evolve. And obviously, also, the demand will change by season. So this is what we're seeing during the summer, but when it comes to October or January, it could be very different.
Okay, last call on ferries, yep.
Will the MetroCard ever be connected to the system?
That is a live issue, meaning I think there would be a lot to be said for that at the appropriate time. There's a lot to work out, what technology and cost and everything else. But that's certainly something we're looking at strongly as we get down the line. I think the simple way to think about this is phase 1 here is to build out the routes that have already been announced through the beginning of 2018, see how that's going, see what we have to make in the way of adjustments, decide if we want to add additional routes. That's the first set of things we have to deal with. We're definitely going to have discussions with the MTA. We've started them very broadly, but we want to get into a detailed discussion about whether we can find a way to connect this to it. Obviously, the same with light rail when that comes on board. But I do want to emphasize it's a good idea, but it's also a complicated idea, and it's something that's going to take some real work to resolve. Yes, Mara?
Actually.
Okay, going ahead. Okay, last call on this, because I said I have another thing I want to talk about before we go to general questions. Going once on ferries, twice. Okay. Obviously want to talk about what happened in Washington, D.C. yesterday. So, look, the sad fact is that the vote of the U.S. Senate yesterday took us one step closer to over 1 million New Yorkers being robbed of their health insurance. That's what's going on here. The most fundamental understanding is we woke up yesterday morning with a situation that was very, very gray in the Senate. By the end of the day, the Senate had started decisively on the road to repealing the Affordable Care Act. So I want to remind people what that means. Estimates as high as 1.6 million New Yorkers who could lose their health insurance. A huge strain it will create on our public hospital system, on HHC, on our hospitals and clinics, which already serve a huge number of people who don't have health insurance. So there's hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers who are eligible and don't have health insurance. They go largely to public hospitals. Undocumented folks, that's almost 500,000 people, go largely to public hospitals. Right now, one of the only things that's keeping our public hospital system afloat is the folks who do come in with insurance, whether it's Medicaid or insurance they got under the ACA or any other source. When you talk about well over 1 million people, again, possibly as high as 1.6 million, not having that insurance, going to their public hospitals as the last resort option for health care, all of those visits, we New York City taxpayers are going to pay for. And we have to understand that's going to greatly increase costs at health and hospitals. There's also direct money our hospitals receive through Medicaid that is endangered both by the vote on the repeal of the Affordable Care Act and on the budget proposals that will be debated in the fall. So this is a dangerous, dangerous moment for New York City and obviously for people all over the country. We don't know where it's going, to say the least. If there's a reason for hope, it's that the situation is so chaotic in Washington and there's so much opposition around the country and there's so much mixed feelings even in the Republican Party that there's still a chance to beat this back. So the ball game is still on. We wake up this morning in a worse situation than we were yesterday morning, but this is still an open situation. So look, it is a fair statement to say the repeal of the Affordable Care Act has never been closer, but it's also a fair statement to say we have never had a better chance to stop the repeal once and for all than we're going to have in these next few weeks. There's going to be a battle royale. And my message to New Yorkers is to make your voices heard. There are now lots of organizations that are giving people the opportunity to call into key states and talk to people in those states and ask them to reach their senators and explain how devastating it would be for millions of people to lose health care. We need people to be a part of that. We need people to reach out to their friends and family and relatives, everyone they know in other states. This has to be a fight that people take very, very personally because it will be about whether families can afford health care. And the last thing I want to say is remember, anytime the federal government takes something away, local taxpayers end up paying for it. It's a really simple, painful formula. There's no free lunch. So if a lot of people are getting health care now because of a federal initiative and that is taken away, we here in New York City will end up getting the bill and we'll end up paying the price. And that's going to be true in cities and towns all over America, so many of which are stressed already with all the things they have to do. So big fight ahead. It could be weeks. It could be longer. But it's a chance to avert disaster, and everyone's got to get in this fight. So questions on that or any other topics, Mara?
Mr. Mayor, going to the subways for a moment. Last night we were in the R train station with you, overheard a passerby kind of call out to you, fix the subways. I'm aware that it's largely the state's responsibility, and yet why not just put aside the fight for now over the, whose funding responsibility this is, and say, well, if you support the plan, just put up the money now and be the bigger person, and then worry about the money later when New Yorkers.
It's not about how big a person any of us is. It's about what's fair for New York City and our taxpayers. So, plan is a good start. The money is there. I'm not going to see almost $500 million in money that was meant for the MTA diverted away from it and stay silent about that. That's not fair to New York City subway riders. It's not fair to New York City taxpayers. And I understand respectfully why the media is not more interested in why that money was diverted and where it is now and why it isn't being given back in a moment of crisis. That's what we should be focused on. So that's the right thing to do. In addition, we've obviously talked about things like, which I didn't know about until you raised it to me, a lot of you last week, the lights for the Kosciuszko Bridge, which is easy, obvious money that should be diverted to the immediate crisis. The state has to take responsibility for the thing it runs. It's as simple as that. They tried, as you saw in the last few weeks, to muddy the waters on who really ran it. I think that was pretty soundly beaten back by folks who looked at the facts and looked at the history. It's the state's responsibility to fix the situation. They have the resources available. Use them. Now, we will absolutely put forward real resources through our agencies. I've said very clearly, they need more help. Joe Lhota put in his plan he needed more help from NYPD in terms of addressing littering and other things in the subways. We'll happily do that. We can add additional resources there. We can add additional resources for FDNY to help address issues in the subways when passengers are sick or whatever it may be. We're happy to do more to help them address the homeless problem they have in the subways. We'll go in with our resources on that. That's going to add up to some real money. That's the kind of thing I think is appropriate given the responsibilities we have currently. But I just want the MTA to own up to its own responsibilities and use the money it has. That's the other thing. I think that's a great question, how so much money is sitting there not being used effectively. And I think Joe Lhota was pretty honest yesterday that one of his key missions is to figure out how to make that agency spend its money better. Let's see that happen, and then we can all work together on the bigger future. Dave?
Mayor Hanson, related to that, though, why not yesterday when you came out with your response to Lota's plan say, okay, we'll give you this money from the city if you give us some control over the subway system?
It's a fair question, because right now I think we have a chance for the current structure to work because finally responsibility is being taken. Remember, we've talked about this before, Dave, the history of MTA is a very unfortunate one because part of what motivated the creation of MTA was to insulate its decisions from the will of the people and make it easier to do things without anyone knowing who the hell's in charge. And lo and behold, you ask most New Yorkers, they're not clear who's in charge. More and more they understand it is the state and the governor, but there's still a lot of gray. I think it's most effective in anything government if one person is responsible, that you can hold accountable and the people can hold accountable. So what I think's happened in these last weeks as a result of this crisis is this question's been called, which is a good thing for New York City. And now it's clear. The state's responsible for the MTA. The governor, ultimately, the governor names the head of the MTA. Good choice, Joe Lhota. Joe Lhota did a good thing yesterday. Stepped up, took charge, offered a plan. That's what we've been needing. I think that could work. And we will work going forward on the ways to make all of that work for the long term. But the best of all worlds would be to get the current structure to work. If it doesn't, then it's a very live discussion of what should happen in the future if we need to restructure the whole thing. But I'm at least encouraged since yesterday that Joe Lhota, I think, does have the skills to get the job done and did offer a plan that started to address some of the real problems. Gloria?
So are you saying you're not willing to negotiate in any way with the MTA or with Joe Lhota? He seemed to take a more friendly approach yesterday when he delivered his plan. He seemed to be offering you an olive branch to figure this out. You went out and had the press conference.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? You don't want to negotiate?
Gloria, it's not, again, I'm always interested in why that is the subtext of the question. Isn't it good to give city money away? I don't think it is good to give city money away. Not when we're facing the challenges that I've just described a moment ago on health care alone. I think it's good to participate when everyone else has done what they were supposed to do. So right now, we gave the MTA $2.5 billion in capital funds. We were not required to. We made that decision working with the city council. That was above and beyond. And I've mentioned, with all due respect to them, and Joe Lhota's brand new, but with all due respect to them, a very, very small percentage of that money has been used after 2 years. So we did that. Good faith. Haven't seen a lot of result yet. On this immediate need, come on, it's the exact same. I don't know how they managed to come up with the exact same dollar figure, but it's the exact same dollar figure as the amount of money that has been diverted away from the MTA to the state budget, literally from taxes earmarked for the MTA. Why would I want to give up New York City taxpayer dollars, which are not abundant? We have huge challenges here and huge new problems coming from Washington when the state has not even reimbursed the MTA for the money it took. Let's do that first. And then we can talk about ways to work together going forward.
When you talk about unspent capital money, Is part of that the fact that capital projects by definition take so long to get done, and usually the bigger payment doesn't get done until that project is completed?
There's some truth in that, but I think, look, I don't know if you guys have suddenly had a revisionist view of the world, but I think it's pretty well established over years, in fact decades, the MTA has been historically inefficient. This is part of the problem. And I've seen plenty of reporting over time, so I want you to keep that in mind. MTA has had a problem with its operations for a long, long time. The problem is, over the last years where there was a chance to make the tough choices on things like fixing the signals and all, unfortunately, people made the easy choices and deferred and deferred and deferred. So, no, I actually don't let them off the hook on that. It's not been an efficiently run agency. They have not spent the money they have, and they made the wrong choices about where to put their money. I told you, Rahm Emanuel's op-ed was surprising on one level, but substantively was correct. Chicago made the right choices, and they're having a better experience with their subways as a result. Unfortunately, MTA made the wrong choices. So this all needs to be brought out in the open. There needs to be accountability. There needs to be an agreement that the MTA has to figure out how to spend money better. I'll give you an example from here in the city. School Construction Authority used to be incredibly inefficient. A lot of work went into fixing it over years. Now, I give money to School Construction Authority. It's stunning how quickly they are building new schools, new pre-K centers, you name it. And I said the other day at one of these gatherings, we're giving them more and more money because they're using it so well. Let's get the MTA to actually do what it should do and take in that money and turn it around as quickly as humanly possible. And that has not been the history. Jillian?
You kind of give us some background on the decision, or what went into the decision of having Emma Wolf be involved in negotiating with Horrenda Singh for the lease at Water's Edge, and whether somebody else who hadn't donated to your campaign or been on your inaugural committee would have had access to such high-level people in trying to settle it.
Yeah, I have no clue about how those specific decisions were made or meetings happened. That was well after I paid any attention to this specific issue. But I do want to note, every day we have community leaders, we have elected officials, we have business leaders come to us with issues. If they're simple, if it's easy to understand, yes, no, quick, they get handled quickly. Some are very complex and go on for months and years. It always astounds me how long it can take to resolve some things, but this was a complex issue, long before we knew of any of his other problems and any of the things he had done wrong. All we knew was here is a business person in Queens with a big establishment, employed a lot of people, and had valid concerns that never got resolved. So that's why it kept going on, and because it never got resolved. But there's plenty of cases where my colleagues around me bring issues to us that go on for a long time, and we have to bring a lot of people and a lot of agencies to get them finally resolved. Goal is just get it done and move on to the next. Yeah.
Your staff said it was untrue that police were directed to sweep the subway platforms of homeless people on Sunday when you took a train ride from parts of the Borough Hall. There's an email that shows that directive was given.
I have not seen any email that shows that. Look, there are people in any agency who have an axe to grind. And so someone sends an email saying, oh, this was said. I haven't seen any directive given. And if it was given, it shouldn't have been. I ride the subways all the time. There's no sweeps. So if someone's, look, I know you guys like to focus on things like this. If someone's doing it because they have an axe to grind politically, God bless them. But that's not the policy. The policy is not to do sweeps. I get on the subway, whatever's happening in the subway, I'm going to experience it with everyone else.
Did you seek out any email trail or records?
I don't care, my friend, because it does not matter. Read my lips. I don't care. It's an irrelevancy. It's either a fraud because someone's just trying to stir the pot and give the New York Post something to write about, or if it happened, it shouldn't have happened, and we'll make sure people know in the future it's not the right thing. We don't do sweeps. It doesn't make sense. Any approach taken to homeless in the subways or any other problem should be the same every single day, regardless of whether I'm around. I've finished it. Go ahead.
You just said you take the subways all the time. Back in June, you told a radio listener that you weren't going to take the subways and change your travel habits because in your words, you called it cheap subways.
Yeah, I covered this the other day, but I'll do it for you again. There was a very specific question on WNYC about going to the gym in the morning. And I said, the car is going either way. That's just a security protocol. If I took the subway all the way, which would take a lot more time, the car is going either way. the caller was saying, oh, you shouldn't have the cars go for environmental reasons. I was trying to inform the caller that the car is going either way. That's a very different question than whether I ride the subway, which I've been riding all my life. And I've told you guys for 20 years it was the only thing I rode. I've been using the subway throughout, generally when it was just the better choice because we were trying to get somewhere quick and it made more sense than the car. Now I've said I'm going to be out there more on purpose because this issue is of such deep concern to New Yorkers. People's everyday lives are being affected by this crisis. They need to see results. Yesterday was a good day because a plan came forward, but the plan being put into effect is a whole other matter. So I'm going to be out there to keep sending a message to the MTA. They've got to fix these problems quickly. Again, my point was, if I'm riding every day on a route where my cars are going, and the specific question about why don't you leave your cars behind, I was trying to tell the rider the cars aren't going to be left behind. So his specific concern, that's why I used that phrase, because what he wanted wasn't going to happen. But I'm going to go on the subways during this crisis to make a point. The MTA has got to get its act together. Yesterday's a good start. We need to see more. Dave.
Mayor, can we get your reaction on what the president said this morning about banning transgender people?
Yeah,
and also, do you think that most Americans care one way or the other about this issue?
I do not, Dave. I appreciate the question a lot. I'll start. I know a council member has some thoughts too. I wish I could say shocked by anything Donald Trump does nowadays, but I can't really use that word anymore. I was really troubled, though. One, to your point, no, I think the vast majority of Americans are tolerant people, inclusive people. They want to see everyone have a chance to be a part of society. And by the way, it's a volunteer army. Anyone who comes forward and volunteers to serve their country and put themselves in harm's way, I say God bless them. I don't care what their identity is. We should welcome them. We should thank them. So it's very, very sad. But, you know, I said this morning on the radio, this is just Donald Trump's playbook going back to the 1980s. He has always loved to divide people. He's always loved to put people down. And he just keeps doing it. But you know what? He's out of sync with the American people. No, I don't think they care. I think they admire anyone who's willing to put on a uniform and serve their country.
So first, I'd like to thank the mayor for allowing me to address this. I am outraged, as every American should be. My husband enrolled in the U.S. Navy when he was a teenager, before he was even out of the closet. And on the suspicion that he was gay, he was removed from the military, even before his parents knew that he was gay, even though he was honorably serving our country overseas in a very sensitive position. We have left that time behind and now appreciate the courage and the willingness of every American to serve our country and even risk their life for our country. This president is a bully. This president is using his presidency to take the most vulnerable among us and separate them from us and deny them their heroism and their courage when they want to serve our country and they want and are willing to risk their lives so that we can be free. It is outrageous. It is disgraceful. Everyone should be angry that this president is willing to do that to the transgender community. They are, in fact, very good and effective servants and soldiers and warriors, just as good as anyone else. And for him to say in these ridiculous, silly, juvenile tweets that somehow our people are going to endanger the ability of our military to be effective and forceful and victorious is a disgraceful attempt to label the trans community as not having valor. It's absolutely outrageous, it's disgraceful, and we should all be outraged.
Amen. Amen, Councilman. Yes, sir.
On the Brooklyn-Queens streetcar,
yes.
Is there any concern that the rising property values that will occur if this is built will displace residents who are already in the neighborhood? And have any estimates been made on that issue?
First of all, these are communities that are going through a lot of growth and a lot of change already. We know this. My argument has always been, if the government doesn't engage in the equation and it's just private sector forces, that displacement has been happening. There's lots of neighborhoods in this city, like Bushwick and Bed-Stuy and so many other examples around the city, Lower East Side, you name it, that have seen a huge amount of change with no government intervention, and displacement did occur. What we propose in this city now is something different, a very aggressive government effort to build affordable housing, subsidize and keep affordable housing in place, give people lawyers to stop evictions, protect the 400,000 people who live in public housing, keep it public, keep it strong. Obviously, a lot of those folks live, I think it's 40,000 live on the proposed light rail route. So the whole strategy has changed to take measures that will fight displacement and preserve affordable housing. But at the same time, people need mass transit. This is a given. They need the opportunity that comes with it. We also can help people if they can get better jobs, if they can get better education, they'll have the resources to be able to afford to stay in their communities. So we got to be able to do both at once. My view is the new light rail will offer a lot more opportunity, and a lot of other measures are being taken to protect affordability. Yes, Juliet?
Yeah, the other day when you released the 5 points related to subway improvement,
Yeah.
one of them was using some sort of ComStat system.
Yes.
Is that something you would devise so that you could measure?
We proposed that, and I give Joe Lhota credit. He was very much in the same place and said the MTA is going to have to do something like that really measures performance much more aggressively, makes better, quicker changes when things aren't working. I mean, that's the beauty of ComStat. That is such a live, dynamic system. The exact opposite of what we've known from the MTA over years and years. MTA lets problems fester. ComStat pushes NYPD to address things very quickly. So I'm glad to hear him embrace it. I think he understands it from his previous experience. Now, the other piece of the equation, which we're calling for, is put it all up publicly. We put up all the ComStat information publicly. MTA should do the same thing. Put up publicly what's working, what's not, what you're doing about it. Show people their improvements. The plan is a promising plan, but now we have to see it implemented very quickly, and we have to see if it actually changes things. All that should be transparent.
Mayor, can you point to a specific case involving a constituent who's not a donor who approaches you on the street, and that kicks off a months-long involvement involving your chief of staff, a fixer?
This thing's been covered and looked at. I'm sure there's many experiences and examples where community leaders, I'm just not going to do that. There's plenty of examples where people have brought complex issues to us, community activists, community residents, leaders, and they take a long time to resolve. The issue's been looked at, it's been covered. I don't have one for you today. I've experienced many. Go ahead.
So I'm going to ask you about 2 aspects of Water's Edge, one at a time. The first one is I want to ask about your contacts with Mr. Singh and with Neil Quatra. Did you speak with Neil Quatra about Water's Edge and DCAS?
It's been looked at. I'm just not going into it further. It's been reviewed and looked at. You can ask it all you want. Again, I'm just not going to speak to it further. It's been looked at exhaustively.
Question. You said when Jill asked that you have no clue how the decision was made to put Emma Wolf into the negotiation.
Yep.
You also said that nothing was done wrong related to Water's Edge. So given that, will you have Eric, because people in your administration do know how those decisions were made, will you have Eric find out for us and tell us who made the decision to involve Emma and what the justice...
This has been looked at exhaustively. There's nothing more to know. This is everyday life in government. So, no, I think it's been covered. Last call. I have nothing else to say to you about this. I have nothing else to say to you. Go ahead.
Not answer my question.
Between you and the governor. There's this ping pong back and forth between you and the governor about MTA. Do you have any plans, or would you be willing to sit down with them and figure out what you're both looking for out of it?
Well, sure. I want to separate the immediate crisis from the long term. You will understand that I was surprised last week, not by the ping pong between me and the governor, but the ping pong within the governor's own team and the MTA about who was responsible for the MTA. And you've seen that evolve over the last few weeks, right? We've seen different definitions every few days of who's actually in charge. And what I have been calling for is a clear acknowledgement of the facts. The MTA is responsible for its operations. The head of the MTA is named by the governor. The state controls the MTA. That's been true for a long time. Wanted to get that one straight. Finally, I think we've seen in the more recent statements from the governor and the chair of the MTA that acknowledgement. The second point is we needed a plan, and I think we got a good start. It's not the whole plan, but we got a good start yesterday. The third point is there has to be responsibility taken for the resources that are needed. There has to be acknowledgement the City of New York gave voluntarily $2.5 billion, and very little of that's been used. There has to be acknowledgement that the State of New York took almost $500 million out of MTA tax money and never returned it. That the money for the Kosciuszko Bridge lights is not a good use of money. That should go to the MTA. That the governor said he'd give $1 billion. That was June 29th. He said he'd give $1 billion more to MTA. Great, let's see the $1 billion. So it was all about getting that clarity. Now, let's say those things hopefully get resolved quickly and we move forward. We all need to sit down, and I'm very ready to sit down with the governor and Joe Lhota and anyone else to figure out what's going to happen over the next 5, 10 years, et cetera, with the MTA, beyond this immediate crisis. We've got a bigger decision we have to make about how this MTA is going to be sustainable for the future. And that decision has to go with a real commitment to New York City, which has not been the case. I used the example yesterday. MTA spends $3 per subway and bus rider in the city, $19 per commuter train rider. There's been an imbalance for a long time. So we need the MTA to recommit to its first priority, which is New York City. We need the MTA to actually make the big investments in things like the signals. It's not sexy, but are absolutely necessary. That's a conversation we're fully going to be a part of, and we're ready to talk about how to make that work.
Like the biggest sticking points. I mean, do you have any?
No, I don't think it's a sticking point. In other words, if someone's responsible, I just get the logic pattern here. Once you've established someone's responsible, then they have to fulfill their responsibilities. So we all agree now, the governor names the chair of the MTA. That chair came forward with a plan. State of New York has to make sure the MTA is working. They control the agency. And, by the way, since we reminded everyone of the $456 million they took out of MTA revenue and never returned, no one's denied that. So I think it's a good time for everyone to ask, where's that money? Can we have it back now so we can solve this problem? We know that money is still available, and it should go to the MTA. Okay.
The governor is in D.C. now with the transportation secretary discussing our transportation.
Yeah.
Do you have any plans to go to D.C.?
I spoke to Secretary Chow 2 months ago or so when I was down there, and I want to say, of all of the members of the cabinet, I found her to be, of the ones I've talked to so far, the most aware of the problems we're facing and the most open to trying to work together, and I appreciate that. Her reality will be entirely determined by the budget vote in September, what kind of resources she's going to have or what's going to be taken away. And I'm very, very worried about, those resources going backwards. The president talks a lot about infrastructure, but his budget proposal takes away a huge amount, billions, for infrastructure. So, yeah, we'll certainly, I'm going to talk to the secretary for sure. We're going to try and build a real partnership. But I think the real ball game will be determined by the vote in the Congress in September. I'm going to get very actively involved in that. We have votes that matter in New York State, some swing congressional votes that matter in New York State on those budget matters, including transportation. There are senators all over the country. My fellow mayors are working to switch votes on to get us a real investment in infrastructure. So that's going to be a big focus. Thanks, everyone.
Mr. Mayor, you going to apologize about